and a very warm welcome to all the people attending this webinar today on using AI to fuel innovation. COVID-19 has spurred digital innovation and has positioned AI and analytics at the center of business operations. Not only does it boost productivity for crafting new products and services, but also accentuates corporate values, reduces supply chain issues, and power new startups. In this webinar, we will discuss some current trends, approaches, and techniques in AI and ML, along with the impact of AI adoption during COVID and the associated challenges, the best practices to operationalize ML at scale, and how businesses can build their ML pipeline to enable an analysis of real-time data. To answer these questions, we have with us Mr. Sundar Ramamoorthy. He's the Managing Director, Global Delivery Lead, Solutions.AI from AI Hub Accenture. We also have Mr. Pritam Kanti Paul, the Managing Director, Accenture, leader of AI Next Capabilities and Tools, Applied Intelligence India Hub. Hi all. Along with them, we also have Mr. Kaushik Sanyal, who is the Managing Director, Applied Intelligence Accenture. He will be moderating the discussion today. I will now hand over the discussion to Mr. Kaushik for moderation. Please take it over.
Thank you, Sajati. Thank you, Sundar, and thank you, Pritam, for agreeing to be in this, I think, an interesting discussion about how we can use AI to fuel innovation across organizations and across various companies over here. So let me quickly start off over here. Sundar, I'll start off with you. AI is becoming an enabler for innovation in various organizations. So what, according to you, are the key enablers for this? Are there, and how are new revenue streams being generated through technology innovation? Could you help us a little bit with that?
Yeah, if you look at from small businesses to large global players, organizations are embracing AI. And AI adoption actually skyrocketed during the pandemic, right? The study at 52 stage of the company to the consumer and business digital adoption in a matter of a few weeks. Companies are actually using AI for creating intelligent product, offering intelligent services, improving internal business processes, reducing cost, right? When we talk about enabling AI, right, I think two things are very important, right? One is the digitization journey, right? Without a strong digital infrastructure, the companies will not have the right data for build the models or to transform the insights into actions at scale, right? So that is one thing.
Thank you, Sundar. So this is interesting. Some of the statistics that you threw up, about 52% of the companies adopting AI, the fact that they have gone through this innovation cycle in weeks, what they could have done in a normal thing in years, is important. How do you think innovation really should be done in the culture of innovation? It's not something for large organizations to adopt very quickly. Do they bring in small employees, create groups, and bring out that culture of innovation? Or do they kind of try and do a big bang approach? What have you seen from your experiences have been the successful ways that companies have adopted innovation?
Successful innovation requires organization to understand the different elements of the innovation process. Some of the key enablers are, one is dedicated innovation team, right? What I have seen in Accenture as well as at our clients is the client have a dedicated innovation team, right, to help support idea generation and idea sharing. The second one is idea sharing platform, right? We need to bring people together, generate ideas and collaboratively share ideas, right? So we need a right platform for people to submit their ideas, to review their ideas, comment on others' ideas, and also to rank on. Then the third thing is a company needs to set up idea screening process, right? Because the employees need to know that their ideas are being considered. And this can be done in multiple ways, right? And the fourth thing I would say is innovation champions. Organization needs to identify leaders who can advocate innovation, who can support the idea generation and innovation process, right? The leaders can inspire change throughout the organization by asking questions, supporting ideas, and demanding radical changes. Finally, the organization need to create a creative, collaborative, technical platform with required tools, technologies, data, right, for people to come together and experiment their ideas, build prototypes and products. And this platform should be open to a larger employee base as well, for others to feel and suggest recommendation. So if organization focus on these 5 things, from setting up an idea sharing platform and having a screening process, and then identifying champions to drive innovation, and then enabling the technical platform, that would lead organization towards innovation success.
Thank you, Sundar. Pritam, let me come to you now. We've talked about AI ML interchangeably. What I wanted to understand from you first is, can you help explain what is ML ops?
Yep. Thank you, Kaushik. It's great being here, first of all, and great to hear Sundar's views. I think all of us who are in AI as a field would probably agree that the headwind that we see today was never before. And one of the reasons why that is there is because of the experimentations that most of the enterprises did over the last few years. But if you see today, most of the enterprises and CXOs, they're also kind of expecting the experimentation to move into more like a scaled approach of driving multiple number of use cases where people are coming together, sharing resources, making any experimentation immediately move into implemented solution. Now, if you look at all of these, when we are kind of probably doing, experimentation in a silo, one model, implement that, see how it works, you need a very different approach as against when you are actually trying to kind of do it as an organization. For many of the people, ML ops basically means operationalization of machine learning pipeline. So which means, how the data moves in, how the algorithm is actually kind of fitted in. If you're really talking about a very large, their MLOps platform, called it as that's the platform like Michelangelo and others. These were platforms which were, enabling Ubers, LinkedIn's and companies like that for their, scaled way of implementing engineering. But when you look at enterprises will not only solve one type of problem, one aspect of problem. They will solve multiple different type of problems and cutting across various types of data and systems. Mm-hmm. So there will be evolution of such kind of open source systems into something that works for every individual companies, right? So there'll be customizations that will be required to make it really enterprise friendly for others. So I think, yes, a company who is looking at MLOps, not only about the MLOps pipeline, but holistically, will also evolve maybe a system for themselves. There are multiple ways you can buy, you can partner, you can build, but there is certainly something consistent that is required for somebody. And on top of that, obviously, your skills that needs to be developed across the world.
Thank you, Pritam. I think this was very exhaustive answer from you in terms of explaining what is MLOps, how it is applied, how it is deployed, and how companies can really benefit from it. We talked a little bit about this innovation, Sundar, and in addition to that, we talked about how companies have kind of transformed themselves during this COVID period in terms of embracing this AI-based innovation within weeks that people were originally doing or would have taken years to do it. Have you found certain specific areas where they have focused on certain specific business areas where this AI innovation has really come for? Is it coming in more the D2C frameworks? Is it coming more in the supply chain frameworks? Where do you see more of this AI innovation really coming towards?
Yeah, good questions. I think I would like to talk about what exactly happened during the pandemic, right? So in the pandemic, the working style changed, and then the customer buying behavior changed. So a lot of the companies who have already adopted AI, they were able to limit the risk from the COVID, right? So they were able to leverage AI like virtual assistants, the chatbots, basically to improve the customer experience, right? Reduce cost, address complex customer queries, right? Banks actually transition to remote sales and services, right? And then the lot other organization kind of accelerated their AI adoption. So now companies are actually putting AI across the value chain, right? Right from building the product and services, customer outreach, then supply chain, right? So it is across the value chain. And if you look like specific industries, right? If you look at the healthcare industry, a lot of the drug discoveries, right, are happening quickly using data and AI, right? And then you have this virtual nursing assistants that we have seen in the pandemic to monitor the patients, right? And then if you look at the banks, they are focusing more on the customer side of things to identify, okay, what product and services they can propose and push automatically to their clients, right? And then how can they serve clients remotely, right? And if you look at telecoms, a lot of focus is on customer servicing, right? Using chatbots or virtual agents, and then enabling a lot of digital channels, right? So that is a heavy focus now on the customer service. That's where the companies are using. But we can see that AI and data has been used for building the product and services, and also to drive their supply chain.
Thanks, Sundar. So, what I'm getting from you is there are, very, of course, areas like customer service, supply chain, which there are adoption of AI is happening. But in addition to that, largely what is happening is also there are pockets of areas around which AI is getting implemented, like you mentioned on the healthcare side or in the financial services side, that we hadn't probably thought about earlier. And these are some of the new areas that probably AI innovation is happening. So that brings me to the next question, Pritam, for you. You are driving the next gen capabilities within Accenture. So what do you think over the next 3 years, now that we are hopefully coming out of the COVID wave, but we are also facing some geopolitical pressures and other things? What do you think will be the challenges or the trends in AI adoption that you see will be coming in the next 3 to 4 years?
Right. No, it's a very, very pertinent question, Kaushik. I think the excitement is all there. There is so much of infrastructure in place. I think data in many of the places, I would still say that we are still kind of working on data being made available in the right way. But in broad level, I think the ammunitions are in place for right AI systems. But as you pointed out, I think the most important aspect is about are we ready for enabling AI in an enterprise? And I feel that there are two parts of that, right? One probably starts with at the beginning, which is more about AI strategy, right? And I think as enterprises, you will see that CXO is talking about now that as enterprises they had data strategy, how to make data available to enable experimentation, to enable insights available on hand, right? And we went all across the corner of the enterprises to get the data. But AI strategy is little beyond that. It kind of obviously talks about not only about the use cases, but it also talks about how will man and machine work together, right? How will the system be put in place where a lot of people will come together, right? From design to development to implementation to actually kind of driving adoption. Lot of work that AI is driving today is about digital automation or intelligent automations. Now that means that it is going to be a completely new process, a process which needs to be creating its own set of confidence, adoption in people's mind, effort and money force is properly, kind of educated and trained to kind of walk on that, right? The other aspect is really about, with great tools comes great responsibility, right? So it's about governing what you are doing. Now, I remember probably 5, 7, 10 years back, one model from financial services, we used to take maybe, I don't know, 2 months time to actually kind of stress test, decide and implement. Now your models are changing with every data points. So how do you govern that model? How do you create that sense of confidence on those models that you are in control of what is happening with that, right? Is it not adding any bias? It's not taking a right. So there are multiple aspects beyond the modeling and data and technology itself that probably which broadly you can put on the culture side, starting from top on, is the leadership really connected and aligned with the AI strategy beyond the data and analytics strategy? Do we have the governance systems in place? Is there a process of making people aware and on how to work with a AI driven system? So all of those in my mind are going to be extremely critical for taking the advantage of the technologies that we have in hand at this moment.
I think you gave us a lot of things to think about here, Pritam. Talking about how we should be thinking about more about AI strategy than moving away from the data strategy part. How the man and machine will be working with another. So probably people are always afraid about the man and machine kind of cohabiting together, and the intelligent automation, the digital automation that you kind of spoke about, and how we have to structure it. So my follow-up question, some of it probably you've already answered, but the follow-up question is to what are the best practices to successfully build this AI strategy and drive implementations? Can leaders craft the next gen infrastructure to better fit? What does CEO priorities have to be around this thing to make sure that organizations really adopt these things effectively and drive this thing going forward in a more cohesive fashion?
Yeah. And Kaushik, I must say that there are companies who are taking significant advantage of these already. There are companies who you can call as North Stars, that you can mimic on how to kind of take it much more seriously at an enterprise level. But Kaushik, in my mind, I think when people are building this enterprise strategy around AI, they need to think about all of these aspects, right? So there is no one size fit all, but it has to be really thinking about what are the big transformations that the company is trying to kind of drive, right? It might not be incremental innovation. It might be just really a significant change. Like for an example, so many companies have completely changed their channel of reaching out to their customers, and they have become completely digital. Like I'm aware of a company who is working today on financial services, who because of the pandemic has shifted from offline way of kind of getting acquisition done to a completely digital mode of working. Now when you do that, your complete system of records changes. The type of information that you are getting, how you are getting the information, your KYC done, everything is different, right? So I think what was probably important for the company is to first think about what am I trying to do as a company, and what is it that the company will become, right? And it starts from there, and then it actually comes back saying, okay, that means this type of systems, this type of data, these are the big programs that I will kind of drive. This is how I'll enable the whole organization, right? So more majority of the companies who are kind of driving it in a big way, they're now having a AI leader for the company, or it can be somebody who can be chief digital officer, can be the data and AI officer. There can be different names in the company, but somebody who is thinking about the strategy and also the building blocks of the strategy. So I think it's a combination of all of these things that actually comes together when you are thinking about holistic strategy. And I talked about a few of the things before also, the governance and many other things. And it's not only about the upfront strategy.
Thank you, Pritam. Thank you.
Kaushik, if you don't mind, I just wanted to add a couple more.
Sure, absolutely.
On what Pritam has said, right? So, the culture is a very important thing. There are two more things where companies typically face challenges, right, when it comes to AI adoption, right? One is obviously data. The other one is the people, right? So if company need to succeed on AI, data and analytics, right? So they need sufficient quality data to build and train AI models, right? Mm-hmm. Garbage in, garbage out, right? Better the data, the better the results. But some industries face challenges with respect to data privacy issues, data inaccessibility. But the good thing now is a lot of tools are available to overcome that lack of data, right? Like smart data fabric, generating synthetic data, a lot of simulation environment and automation, right? And Pritam well said that enterprises need to set up a very good data management process within their organization at the early stage, right? To avoid problems with enhancing the existing data sets, right? So data is kind of, I would say, the one part of the equation, but the other part is the people, right? Enterprises need right team with the right skill sets to make AI work, right? But many companies are struggling to hire high quality data scientists or machine learning specialists because of very high demand and less supply. But I think that this would solve by the old economic school principle of supply and demand, because data science role has been looked as the most exciting and lucrative option now. So talent is growing. But the interesting aspect is a lot of AI solutions are now available as a service. So you don't need the traditional data scientist, right? So what the companies are doing is they are upskilling the existing workforce, right, for deploying and for operating AI solutions. And then when it comes to innovation, right, they are looking at hardcore data scientists. So yeah, these two, in addition to what Pritam has said, if company can work on it, then their AI adoption, right, would be smoother and smarter.
I'm sorry, it's an interesting point. Just to probably add one example to that, right? So I think the other important point is that how do parts of the organization work together? I think that becomes another important aspect that will be more and more important as we see AI being driven. Like, I'm aware of a company who is kind of during this pandemic had severe challenges in terms of availability of their products or making products available at various places. And they realized that to solve the problem, it's not only about dealing with the supply chain. It's also about connecting everything, every decision that they take together. Like the promotions that you run, the amount of merchandising actions that you are doing, to actually what is available on ground, to what is the raw material available. So they started kind of building. It was a difficult exercise, lack of better term, maybe a digital twin for the whole planning process, starting from availability of goods to actually the commercial spends that you're making. Now, when you do that, you need to bring so many different parts of the groups together, right? Your finance team needs to come together with the marketing team, with revenue management team, and then your supply chain team. And all of those need to come together to kind of make such a process really successful. The amount of people associated around this so-called AI brain is phenomenal. And unless and until a very strong strategy is created and alignment is driven across the organization on what I want to really drive, it will be an extremely difficult problem to solve.
No, I think there's Amazing points. The points around what you talked about from overall strategy. How do we kind of build this thing together end to end, looking at all the different factors? The things that Sundar brought about, which is around the data. Are we having good available data? How do we make sure that the data availability is good? And then the people front, the talent front. And trust me, we're going to come on to the talent question a lot, because India is all about talent. So we need to discuss that thing. But there was a certain thing that you touched upon, Pritam, earlier, and I want to go and talk to Sundar about it. When Pritam was talking about the larger strategy in the adoption of AI going forward, he talked about the possibility of biases getting creeping in models and things like that. So my question to you over here is, right now, how do you work? How does, related to risk ethics, how does that thing work out? We are hearing a lot about it. Can you, Sundar, help us with some examples of how do we kind of make this thing work? How are companies adopting AI to address this ethical issues, the risks and biases that comes in terms of race, gender, other factors being in a problem, which might impact your ability to get access to financials? How are we going to work those things out in the future?
Yeah, great question. And I think this becomes very important when companies work out the clear strategy at the beginning, right? When they identify the use cases, right? So companies clearly need to understand all compliance and security issues at the planning stage, right? And they can reduce the risk. But right, despite the real value enterprises can achieve through artificial intelligence, right? Like you said, many still struggle to address the risk associated with it, right? So those risks are bias, discrimination, fairness, and then the explainability, right? So these are some of the areas which are paramount concern for the companies of late when they talk about artificial intelligence, right? As AI decisions increasingly influence and impact people's lives at scale, or the decision-making process, right? So the responsibility associated with it for the enterprises to manage the ethical and social technical implication of AI adoption also increases, right? So what companies are now doing is they are focusing on responsible to address the risk through something called responsible AI, right? And we Accenture have been implementing a responsible AI within Accenture, as well as a lot of our clients. So responsible AI is all about practice of designing, developing, and deploying AI with good intention to empower employees as well as businesses, right? So that the customers and the societies, right, they are not impacted, right, in a bad way, right? And this kind of allows companies as well to engender trust and scale AI with confidence. So responsible AI is kind of an answer to address the bias, discrimination, all this risk associated with AI.
Thank you. Thank you, Sundar. Pritam, is there anything you want to add to this one?
Yeah, no, I think Sundar has very well kind of covered, and I think we and Accenture, this is certainly a big area of focus for us. Just maybe just one or two peripheral points on that. I think there's a whole aspect of these itself will become a good design exercise, right? So see, I mean, when you are building a model on a data and the data is biased, the model is expected to be biased. But how do you design it to kind of work? How do you add experimentations? How do you take the right parts of the data? So, I think a lot of innovative design is required to kind of ensure that the, so-called historical bias that is already crept in the data is not really kind of looked at. And it's a combination of domain combination of design on what you don't want to creep in the system. I think another very important thing that will become very critical, and a lot of research is happening, and even we as an Accenture are doing a lot of heavy research around that, is traceability of decisions, right? So, can you trace a decision on, why that decision was taken? At times, our explainability stops at saying, oh, I built a model. This model has, these are my core factors. These factors are giving X percentage impact to the decision making. But when you take a particular decision, that decision is based on a particular set of information, and the model kind of, if it's a black box, it's a black box model taking a decision in a either way. How do you know why that decision was taken, and would you be able to go back to that, right? And that's why, few years back, when, let's say, financial services companies, they used to almost kind of break their scoring models into, different segments and say, okay, it's much easier to decide that what is really made the decision possible. But in such, and there are a lot of, this is a matter of research on how do you track, how do you trace, it has to be probably traced back to the data, the source of data, where it is actually coming from.
Yes.
So very interesting area, and probably one of the most important area for AI to become sustainable, right? Sustainability is the word everywhere, but this is probably the most important aspect of sustainability for AI that all of the community is probably going to work on.
The issue that you clearly mentioned about the historical biases, and that's very difficult because the data that you're going to be working on has that historical biases, where the data is coming from. Those are all very challenging issues to be resolved. And I don't believe it will be resolved immediately, but it will take a long time to kind of work through all those different things and resolve it out. But it's at least a start. At least we are looking into it, and that's very good from a AI perspective.
And knowing the problem is probably the most important
Knowing
part of the solving the problem itself. That
absolutely,
at least
being aware of it and
methods of understanding whether there is a bias creeping in. The rest is, I think, it's a design exercise to solve for.
Absolutely. And I think that that's an important one for us to consider as a community of practitioners as to how we will deal with this thing going forward. Let me switch back to something Sundar brought up about talent. Okay. Now, talent is a challenge, frankly speaking. So what is, and, given the scale that organizations are going through, not just service organizations like Accenture, but any organization is trying to adopt and bring in AI talent. What are the opportunities that AI offers, and how can people really be made to kind of get into this area? How do we kind of build scale, build people, build skills so that we can really support this growing demand for AI in the near future and in the medium term future?
I can try first, and Sundar, you can add with me.
Sure.
So I think first and foremost, Kaushik, is acknowledging that what are the skills that is required in the whole AI value space, right? We in Accenture have tried to define the capabilities that actually kind of ensures that we are able to deliver value, and there you need to be little beyond only thinking about building models, getting the data right. It starts from strategy to end up to literacy. I think we talked about that. The second, if I go into the specific problem. So once you kind of identified that these are the skills that is required, and all of those are important, like, having an amazing set of program managers who can program manage the AI programs is equally important as having a great set of data scientists. Now comes probably the next level, the technical challenge of probably, as you pointed out, that having the right people in pockets. I would agree that we have challenges, right? Because the it's a good problem to have. The demand is extremely good. Everybody is really trying to jump into this area. So all of us are trying to build up people, and it's not that you have people directly coming from colleges, at least in India, who are completely ready to immediately get into the AI job. So I think it's a combination of multiple aspects. It's a combination of having the right learning and development platforms. And I think that's an investment that companies like us have done significantly. And probably that's probably the one of the most important thing, that, when you are thinking about scale, making trainings and processes available. But remember, training in today's world is not only about just making a classroom training and others, gamifying it with hackathon and many others, giving exposure in experimental way of kind of learning as against classroom way of learning, will be an important thing. And, having the right mix of people in terms of training. And then on the other side, there's also an aspect that you don't know, right? You need to experiment. So having a right set of people in the organization that is continuously progressing your capability, like investing on some innovations, experimentations. Like today, we're talking about areas like GPT-3, transform-based, language models. There's a cutting edge changes happening, right? And, you probably need to be associated with that and, equally kind of experimenting alongside. And when we do that, again, after some time, you need to kind of take that to a broader group of people. So I think it's a good combination of identifying holistically what skills are really required for any company to really drive AI programs. Then on certain areas where gaps are, it's a combination of training in a new age way, I would say, and also experimentations and innovations.
Interesting. Sundar, before you answer that question, I also know that you are involved in all our collaborations that we are having with the academic institutions to build up the skill set. When you can answer the question also regarding the talent, to add on to what Pritam just added, if you can tell us how this, involvement with the academic institutions is happening, what are we trying to achieve to bring in this scale of talent that we really need, not only within the organization, but also to feed into the overall, AI talent pool that is available for the India marketplace.
Institutes are great source for talent and ideas, right? And Accenture looks at universities to not only anchor innovation agenda, but also groom talent, right? And partnership with institutes helps Accenture to expand the innovation ecosystem and also the accessibility to the talent. So across the globe, Accenture has been partnering with a lot of top tier institutes like MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Wharton, and India IITs, right? Not only for research, but also building cutting edge learning programs through which we can quickly upskill and reskill people, right? And when we talk about India, Accenture has been partnering with IIT Bombay, Patna, IIT Madras, and then the mathematical institutes, Delhi School of Economics, right? In terms of building AI capabilities around neural network, machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, et cetera, et cetera. And most importantly, we have a robust internship program where we recruit interns from tier 1 colleges in India, right, and bring it to Accenture ecosystem and let them experience how do we build solutions, how do we deliver solutions, right, and that internship program is doing wonders, I would say, right, and probably the organizations can scale this to a larger level.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for explaining to us a little bit about how we are also collaborating with the academic institutions, not only globally, but also here in India, and what are we doing as a part of our internship program to scale the talent. The other thing that we talked a lot about was the data part. And as we all know, the data is going to be the one that's going to allow us to build a lot of the innovation. And we also understand that with the adoption of cloud that is happening across the board, that is enabling us to make it happen much more effectively. Now, Accenture, being in the position of where it is, works with all the different cloud providers. So how do you see this relationship about our partnerships with the different mags rolling out. I also know that you've been working on Alibaba as an additional cloud provider, especially for certain clients. How do you see this overall evolution, Sundar, working out in terms of these partnerships? What do you see? Where do you see Accenture operating? Where do you see these cloud providers operating? How do you see us cohabitating in this AI world as we go forward?
Yeah. Um, I think in the last 2 to 3 years, a lot of innovation has happened in the cloud ecosystem, right? And if you look at 5 years back, we used to build a lot of predictive models, segmentation model, recommendation models, but that's not the case now, right? Our cloud ecosystem partners like GCP, Azure, right, AWS, and Alibaba, they have progressed immensely in this area. And leveraging these microservices helps companies like Accenture to deliver things to our client at a faster rate, right? The cloud ecosystem partner is helping Accenture in terms of client delivery, and plus a lot around the innovation kind of the things, right? And then the ecosystem partners are also helping us to provide the training, right, in terms of upskilling and the reskilling. So in the future, I expect a lot more to come, but the future is everything is going to happen on cloud, right? And I can say that if any data scientist or data engineer, if they don't know how to operate in cloud, then their future will be in question, because probably in 5 years or 6 years, most of the client's data is going to be on the cloud, and you need people, right, to work in the cloud, build the models, to deploy, and then manage it, operationalize it, right? And this strong partnership with cloud ecosystem is going to speed up that action.
Thank you. So we covered a lot of things in this discussion so far, and one of the areas that we, is the main focus of the topic is about using AI for innovation or fueling innovation. And we talked about how organizations can do it, how organizations can structure themselves, what kind of strategy they need to undertake, what kind of tools, capabilities, and other things and talent they need to undertake. But what can organizations really learn from Accenture in terms of the reward mechanisms that we have in place for sharing ideas, prototype building, patent creations, product ownerships, etc.? Are there things that organizations can learn as to how Accenture is operating? Because at the end of the day, Accenture is probably one of the scaled AI operator globally. So are there things that we can potentially learn, or organizations can potentially learn?
Yeah, rewards and recognition is very important, right? Not only for client delivery, but also for innovation. And not everybody in the organization will be interested around innovation. So you may have some 10 to 20% of the people who are keen on innovation. And the important thing is to identify them, and also to groom them and keep them excited, right? And rewards and recognition helps in that way, right? And from Accenture point of view, we actually reward and recognize people at every stage of the innovation process, right? Right from ideation to prototyping to building the product, right? So for example, we reward people with celebrating performance points for sharing an idea, right? And then solving challenges, and then building prototypes. Then for a successful patent filing, we reward them with very good monetary awards. And most importantly, a plaque signed by the CEO of Accenture as the highest form of recognition, right? And people always look for that, right? Plus, we permit people to become the product owner of the invention, right? And we give them the opportunity to take their invention and pitch it to multiple clients and try to win us some opportunity, right? And that's a big reward. Plus, we are supporting people for writing white papers or showcasing their invention in global events like Mobile World Congress or in NASCOM forums, right? And then writing books. So these are some of the things that we are doing in Accenture, which I think others can also take a leaf out of it.
Thank you, Sundar. Thank you. So performance points, rewards, plaques from CEO, signed by CEO, literacy, education, investments. A lot of good things I think a lot of companies can really learn. Thank you, Pritam and Sundar. This has been a wonderful session. A lot of things that we got to know from you from the perspective of innovation, how AI is driving innovation within organizations, how organizations should really structure and how they should be moving towards the innovation, how they should be kind of building up on the entire culture of innovation within organizations. We learned a lot about from you in terms of how AI and a man and machine should be working together, how we should be scaling the overall experimentation of AI that's happening, how the cloud partners and others are working towards us, and how Accenture is kind of working a strategy in terms of increasing the depth and scale of AI within India as we kind of drive those things forward, and the reward mechanisms that we have adopted that helps us kind of build and scale the AI capabilities within the organization. Thank you again for your time. It has been wonderful talking to both of you.
Okay, thanks,
over to you, Sejati.
Thanks, Pritam.
Thank you.
That's nice talking to you.
Thank you, Sundar. Thank you, Pritam. Very, very wonderful discussion. Thank you, Kaushik, for moderating it so beautifully. We learned a lot about the current trends, the approaches, how companies are adopting. You have already wrapped up for me already, Kaushik, about the entire discussion. But thanks once again, Sundar, Kaushik, and Pritam for doing this with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.